Hello, my name is Ella Glassman, and this interview is part of my Gold Award project titled The Art of Applying.
Hi, my name is Morgan Huntington. I'm the admission coordinator for Chapman University's College of Performing Arts. So here to talk a little bit about our admission process.
All right. So my first question for you is, how are students applying to an arts program at your school evaluated differently from students applying to other academic programs?
Great question. So if you're applying for an arts program, you're going to do our general application through the Common App, and then you're also going to submit a creative supplement on top of it. So that's the wording that our school uses. Depending on the program, it really varies what that is. For our dancers, for instance, it's a video audition of you doing a solo piece. For our theater majors, it's like a monologue of some kind. If you're looking into more theater tech, things like that, it's a portfolio of experiences you've had. Music, it's audition videos. Depending if you're doing composition, it's uploading the scores of things you've written. So it really varies per program, but you're uploading all of those things, and that's really the number one thing that we're looking at. For us, it's a joint decision between our admissions team and our performing arts faculty. So grades are super important as well. But kind of the first step that they evaluate on is the talent area. And since they are pretty small programs and pretty rigorous, they want to make sure you can fit in there. So that's the big difference, is that aspect. And then for certain of our performance degrees, you'll have a callback as well. So once you submit all of that, there's a callback stage before getting your decision. So it's a bit different of an application process than for just applying to one of the other programs at school.
All right. What skill sets do you hope to see in your applicants?
So obviously, I think creativity is huge for any of our arts program. We want to see that you're an original thinker. We want to see kind of what ideas you have and what uniqueness you can bring to our program. We love people who are self-starters, so people who are really showing that they take the initiative themselves, that they want to know, that they seem interested in our program. We love to hear about people's ambitions and goals. That's a huge part. You'll usually have a section in our creative supplement to talk about your goals within your performing arts program. So that's super important to us to see kind of why you think you'd be a good fit here, as well as what you're hoping to do afterwards. And people who are very teachable is super important for us. So especially in our callback stage, there's sometimes, for instance, in our theater programs, they'll give you some notes and see if you can kind of take those and do a redirect of how you would do it. So we want people who are obviously very talented, but also still willing to learn and improve their craft from there.
Do you have suggestions for students interested in pursuing an arts education if their public school does not offer classes in their desired field? Do you take that into account when evaluating their experience?
So for us, really, it's just about what experiences you've had, even if it's not through your school itself. If you've been able to stay involved in it in some way, obviously, depending on the program, they are relatively competitive, and usually all of the arts programs are a bit smaller. So you do need experience in it, but you don't need to have it through a traditional set. If you submit a dancing video and you're amazing, but you haven't had any formal training, we're going to judge it based off the video and the talent that you have, as opposed to the training itself. We like to include, a lot of our programs require like a resume, a creative resume. And that is something that I always want to enforce to people. It doesn't need to be professional work. It doesn't need to be, through kind of the automatic things you would think you need to, the path you need to take to get there. Any experiences that you have that can kind of work into that, any training you have, is super important. But like I said, I think the goal statement and kind of explaining who you are and what you hope to do is just as important as the experience you have and then the talent you have. So just, I would encourage people to explore, outside of their own school programs that they can keep working on it with, keep improving their skills, even if they're not at the highest competitive level, just any way that they can keep honing those in and improving them, and also kind of working towards whatever, finding out what they would want to do with it afterwards is always important.
Right. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We often hear that arts programs are looking for a student's creative voice or unique vision. How do you define that?
Good question. So I think that we define that by really just finding um, unique qualities in people. I think it's hard to say what's creative and what's not, especially in arts programs where is inherently creative, no matter what you're doing. So seeing people who kind of really can feel the music, who really get into it, who kind of can transport themselves into the art that they're doing, I think is super important. And then again, who have like kind of a unique way of doing it is always great. Obviously, everyone has like different training and things that lead to it, but kind of seeing what gives you yourself your own little style. And if you're able to kind of pin down that style and explain it to anyone in any way, I think that's a super good way to brand yourself and kind of identify yourself with the applicant.
What makes a creative portfolio stand out to you?
So obviously, technical skill is super important in any program. Like there's a point where it's just whether or not you are really good at this program or not. So that's the number one thing that we look for. It really is dependent on the program. For dance, we're looking for really strong technique. You're going to be doing a lot of technique classes throughout your whole time. So that's super important that you have. For theater, we have, for instance, a theater performance and a screen acting. Acting for those things are very different. Our screen actors, we want people who see that the acting for it is a little more minute, as it's for screen, and kind of learning how to do that. Whereas theater performance is a little more big and expressive. So making sure people kind of see the difference in things like that. So yeah, I would say skill, being able to show that you kind of like know what your program is you're applying to, and that what you're doing is a good fit for that. And yeah, just having, again, goals. We love to hear about that. We love to get to know you. Our programs are really focused on not just like taking the facts and admitting you from there. We like to try to get to know the students. So we try to add some things. Our theater programs this year have added one of the video requirements. Is called a wild card video. So what they do for that, it's kind of just your chance to show a talent or interest outside of theater that you have. That's not anything that we're grading you on, but it's a great way for us to get to know you better. So that's why we always like to encourage people to talk to them, because these are small class sizes coming in, and our faculty like to know all of our students. They want to get to know you, get to know your personality, again, your goals, why you want this school, why you think you'd fit in. So that's super important, on top of obviously skill and kind of having that unique creativeness to you.
Okay. How important are grades and test scores compared to a portfolio or audition?
Good question. So kind of like I said before, the first, I would say like the number one thing is your portfolio. So that's going to be the thing for those programs that they are like mostly deciding based on. So portfolio is super, super important. That being said, it's a joint decision made between the program and the university. So if you are and I've seen this happen lots of times, you're a super strong creative candidate, but you have really, really low grades, then usually our faculty will say, okay, well, we can't have them here. They're not going to be able to be successful in their time at Chapman. So that will be a no. So while the portfolio is kind of the number one thing, you won't be able to get in without a portfolio that really stands out. You're gonna get denied if you have too low of academics, no matter how strong of a creative applicant you are. So that's super important. When it comes to test scores, our school is actually test optional. So starting like a handful of years ago, we don't require the SAT or ACT. So you can take them and submit them if you'd like them to be considered as part of your application, but it's not a requirement. So test scores for us, obviously, if you do submit it and we see that they're very, very low, it may be a thing for us to note. But if your grades are super strong, that's kind of the more important part for us. So test score is not the biggest deal. You don't even need to submit them for us. But grades are definitely very important. And then if you do have, like, say, one class that you really struggled in high school, or if you had something going on in your personal life that kind of caused your grades to dip, I always encourage people to include those kind of things in your application. So you can kind of explain it, because we read through every detail. We don't just look at the straight facts of it. So we take all of those things into consideration. It's not a flat, like, if your GPA is this or above, you're in. If it's this, you're not. We really read through everything and try to make the best decision. So I would say portfolio is the most important, but you're not going to be able to get in without the grades. And then on top of that, with financial aid and things like that, a lot of that money is really paired with your academics. So grades are super important when it comes to that part of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for students on deciding what their best fit school is?
Good question. So I always think visiting a school, I think if you're able to, is super, super helpful. I think it gives you a really good gauge of whether or not you think you could fit in there. If you're not able to, a lot of times schools have virtual tours, things like that. I think talking with students who are either currently in the program or alumni is really, really helpful. Getting an idea of, like, the student perspective, what your schedule will be like, how you can actually balance that is super important. I think also choosing kind of what size of school you want. If you want to go to a school that has really, really big programs where you'll be part of, like, a huge, huge group. Or if you want something that you really want individualized education, that's super important. And again, this is for the arts as well as for regular school. So I think those are all important factors to consider. I think asking about kind of the curriculum, especially in, like, these arts programs, if you're a dancer and you really, really want to become a ballerina, but then they don't have really that much of an emphasis on ballet, it probably isn't the right fit for you. So kind of looking at where their faculty come from, what backgrounds they have professionally before teaching, as well as their alumni, where people are working, to see if that kind of aligns with what you're hoping to do in the future, I think is really helpful, especially for these more niche programs, where you have usually pretty strong goals of where you'd like to end up.
Right. Do you prefer to see students who have demonstrated a singular focus in terms of their extracurriculars around their chosen art, or do you like to see a student who has a diverse range of extracurriculars?
So we definitely love to see experience in your own field, as much experience as you can. That being said, Chapman is super cares about having students who are well-rounded. So we like to see it when you come into Chapman, but we also really encourage it once you're a student here. We require everyone to have a minor, or if not a minor, we have a thing called a cluster. It's kind of just like a smaller minor that's outside of your own major. So we want people to not be fully focused on their own major, as well as with our GE programs, things like that. We want to encourage you to take classes outside of your own major. Chapman's also a super involved school in general. There's a lot of people who are involved in various clubs, who have jobs, who are double majors, things like that in our arts programs as well. So we really encourage people to be able to explore all of those things and learn new things about themselves, find out that maybe their original plans might be a little different now that they've learned about these other areas. Or it's always fun when you can find something and kind of mold it into your initial plan. For instance, like, we've had dance majors who will go into then also double major in, like, a health science, and then they end up deciding they want to become an athletic trainer specifically for dancers. So I think it's really cool to find ways like that to kind of expand your horizons. Coming into school, we always like to see different extracurriculars. I also know that a lot of, especially arts fields, can be pretty time demanding when you're in high school and everything too. So taking care of yourself, don't try to overwork yourself and do a million things that will be hard. Instead of partially doing a bunch of things, try to really put your energy into the few things that you really care about. But always, I think, good to have interests outside of your one main art interest as well.
Okay. Do you place much weight on students filling their high school schedules with rigorous academic courses like AP classes, or do you prefer to see students take more arts related classes that are not considered to be as academically rigorous?
So we really look at academics more because you're submitting that portfolio for your art program. That's really where we see your arts, and we don't really look as much at what classes in it you've taken. You have that chance in the creative supplement to show kind of that training in that side of you. So your academics should really be a little more focused on academics themselves. You don't need to take all AP classes, but we do definitely take into account if someone hasn't challenged themselves at all, something like that. So I would say it's not, make or break whether or not you take all AP classes or not, but we do like to see people challenge themselves. We do like to see, again, a diverse set of interests and things like that. And that's what our admissions team will be looking at when they're trying to decide for your admission to the university as a whole. So that's super important. And that's what we kind of communicate with our dance team as well. Or sorry, any of our performing arts programs. And yeah, if we see someone who's only really done dance or like taken mostly dance or art or something like that they're successful in, but then they're really struggling in their math classes or their history classes, we don't know how successful they'll be as a student here, because you do have to take those GE classes and some additional classes there. So placing a good focus on your academics is, I would say, super important in your building of your class schedule.
All right. How important is the interview or audition process to Chapman in the application process?
Yeah, so the audition is super, super important for any of our programs that do have it. Some of our arts programs, again, I work with the performing arts specifically, but I do know that like our art degree, our graphic design and stuff, they have the creative supplement, and they make the decision from there. That's how our BA in theater is as well, where it's a little more on the technical theater, costume design, things like that. You just do the portfolio. For any of our performance degrees, our theater ones, dance, music, they have a super strong emphasis on the audition. So like I said, you'll do those initial videos. We call them our pre-screen videos that you'll turn in. Our faculty will review them, decide if they want to invite you to a callback. Then for the callback, that's really the time when they can get to know you better, because whether it's happening on Zoom or in person, they're able to talk to you one-on-one. And so they can get a really much better gauge of kind of who you are, why you'd be a good fit in this program. And that's the things they can really remember when they're going to make final decisions, as well as seeing, obviously, you perform again. Super important, helpful to see what growth you've had since your pre-screen video. So yeah, auditions, very, very important in the process. Because again, that's what they'll kind of say yes or no. And then really the only stage past that, once if you have a yes after all your auditions and you're good to go, the only way you're not going to get in is if then the admissions team says their academics are too low, they can't do it. So if that makes sense at all, the audition is definitely a huge part in it, especially to get into these programs.
Okay. And my last question, what advice do you have for students in creating or selecting pieces for their creative portfolio?
So I would say this is one, not as much about creating it, but I always want to say apply early for every program you can. I think that's super, super beneficial no matter what, especially if you have a callback or anything like that. You're going to have a lot more opportunities the earlier you apply, and a lot of schools require you to apply early. So that's going to be the number one thing that kind of helps you start off on a good foot. Because especially if you apply later to a competitive program, sometimes a lot of the spots have already been taken up. So you have a less of a chance anyways. So that's less about the actual portfolio itself, but just a little tip I always like to give people that I think is super helpful. When it comes to actually picking pieces, I would say picking an audition piece is different than picking a piece for a performance, whether this is for theater or dance or music. It is a performance, but you want to be able to show your ability in those areas. So it may not always be the most over the top thing, but if it's showing your technique, your skill, the training you've had, that's really what you want to do. And then as well as, like I said, kind of finding a way to show your uniqueness and brand yourself in that way. If there's any way you can kind of show that, tell a story through your pieces, your portfolio, anything like that. I think that's always really helpful to kind of give us a full picture of you as a person combined with you as an artist. So those would be, obviously that's a little bit vague, but the main thing I would say when kind of putting your portfolio together, and then again apply early, is always kind of what I tell people as much as you can. Applications at most schools open in like August, so you could start very early, get it out of the way, enjoy your senior year, and you'll have a better chance there too.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.